It's quite surreal how time works. Things that happened long ago, we're still talking about them as if they happened just years ago. And they are things that happened 9 years ago, a decade ago, that feel like they happened ages ago. Things that happened in 2009 feel ancient. And do you know a little exercise you guys can do to really feel old is to read your old emails. Go and find some old email correspondence that you have from like 2009, 2008, and read it. Read the correspondence, especially if you're my age. Go read what you were writing when you were 19, when you were 20, 21, and you think, "Oh my goodness, I I was I was so idealistic. I was so naive. I was so just excited about things that I'm not even excited about anymore. I'm easily excitable. And in a way it's kind of sad because you wish that you had that again. But reading old emails, reading old email correspondence from over a decade ago, it really, really hits you. And it impacts you in that you feel old because you're thinking, man, it's almost like a different person wrote this because I wouldn't write this way now. And it feels like you wrote these emails ages ago. It's really crazy. It's a surreal feeling. Once in a while, I will go to my email and look up stuff that I had written back in '09. If you really, really want to get crazy, go look at your earliest Facebook post. If you are on Facebook, or even MySpace, and I never had a MySpace, but MySpace is a lot older than Facebook. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was there before Facebook. Go look at your earliest posts. Some of them are cool, but some of them are like, what? I listened to this. I listened to some song, and whatever, and I talked about how great the song was. I still do that, by the way. But you can look at your earliest posts, and you're like, wow, some of this stuff is kind of cringy. And in those days, you were so worried about, especially if you're a guy, can I get a date? How do I get a date? And everyone, so many men who are like 15, who are 17, 18, 19, they're just obsessed with getting a girlfriend, and they're so terrified of the idea of being single, and they think that people think that they're losers because they're single or whatever. And they'll go and they'll vent about it online. They'll vent about it on social media or something, and then they'll search online. They'll search for some dating guru or whatever, and some guy on YouTube is going to tell them the same exact damn thing that every single dating guru has been saying for the last past 25, 30 years, even longer than that. Don't text too immediately, wait some time, blah blah blah. They always have these rules, but as you get older, you kind of look back at that, and you just laugh at it. At least this is my case. You just kind of laugh at all of that stuff because it's just silly. The whole thing is just silly, and you come to the point where you see so many miserable marriages and so many miserable relationships that you just become indifferent to the whole thing. You become indifferent to the whole idea of having a girlfriend and getting engaged and all that, because you're like, well, it's a risk either way, right? If you don't get married, then yeah, you might be lonely, but if you do get married, you might be very miserable. So there's a risk in both decisions, and the most dangerous risks tend to be those on the marriage side of things. But that's a different topic. My whole point is how surreal time feels, and it's almost like looking back at at your younger self, really looking back at your younger self, and comparing that self to what you are today. It's almost as if you're two different people, right? But you can't really, and I've heard this sort of thing before, like you change. identities as you get older. You become different people as you get older. And I wouldn't say that at all. I would just say that you change, you become callous to certain things, or you become indifferent to certain things, or you've seen things that would shock you when you were younger, but they don't shock you anymore because you become desensitized to them. I would say also that as you get older, you become your true self gets more and more exposed as you get older, right? You realize things about yourself like, wow, this isn't so bad, or this certain thing scared me, but it doesn't scare me anymore. And as you get older, I wouldn't say that you change. I would say that you expose yourself more and more, right? It's like an onion has different layers, and you expose more layers of who you are. You expose more layers of your true self, and as you get older, the more and more you begin to learn about who you are as a person. That's why it is perceived as though you've changed, but you haven't really changed. You've just opened more of yourself, right? You're the light of time is illuminating your true whole self more and more as you get older. And that's what it is. That's all it is. It's kind of like, and I really like to use this example because I've seen it firsthand. The example of martial arts. You can take somebody who doesn't know anything about martial arts, and believe me, I'm no master in martial arts at all. I was never really good at it, but I did train in it for a little bit of time. And one thing that I noticed about martial arts was that you can take someone who can't kick above their knees, they can't throw a punch, they have zero endurance, zero conditioning, and then you put them through super tough conditioning, you put them through stretching exercises, and it's very difficult at first, and they really want to quit, right? And you think, well, that person is a weakling. And I never thought this way uh, because when I first began training, it was super difficult for me. So I understand how difficult it is. But you can look at somebody that can't kick above their knees, they have no conditioning, they have no endurance, and then you put them through the conditioning, you put them through the training exercises, the stretching exercises, you make them go through all sorts of really, really intense exercises, and at first they want to quit, right? A lot of times they really want to quit, but if they just stay a little bit longer, then they actually start getting good. They can throw a kick higher, they can throw a punch harder, they can withstand in a fight for a little bit longer. They can, instead of gassing out in the first round, they can go through one round before gassing out, and they see improvement in themselves. Have those people changed? Physically, they've changed, but interiorly speaking, in terms of the inner self, they haven't really changed. They've actually discovered something about themselves. They've discovered that they're actually a lot stronger than they really are. And then they stick with it for long enough, and then they can take 3 rounds and they can kick a lot higher. They can kick above somebody's head now, and maybe they can do a full split, and they can do a lot of endurance exercises without gassing out. And they have discovered something about themselves. They have discovered that they're not as cowardly as they thought they were. They have discovered that they are not as weak as they thought they were. It's self-discovery. So going through time is a process of self-discovery. And that's why you can read emails that you've written, or you can look at Facebook posts that you've done back in 2008 or whatever it was, some year long ago, over a decade ago, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. It looks really, really cringy because at that point you were just at a different level of development. It's like a video game character. You start out in a game, you really suck, everything's killing you. It's like when I first started playing Elden Ring, everything was killing me. Everything kills me in Elden Ring. When I first began, everything was killing me, right? The dogs were killing me, the wolves were killing me, the knights were killing me, the little soldiers were killing me, the zombies were killing me, the dragon, everything was killing me. The bats were killing me. Everything was killing me in Elden Ring. Then you start figuring out leveling up, right? You start leveling up on strength and dexterity and endurance, and you just become better as a video game character. Then you start getting better at timing and all these things. And wow, pretty soon you've conquered all of Limgrave, and then you go to a different land. You go to Leyendell, Or you go to Liurnia and all of a sudden it's difficult again. But you continue on with it because you realize that you can continue to get better and you can continue to develop your character, and you know that you're eventually going to get really good at the game as long as you keep leveling up your player and leveling up your weapons. So it's not like, has your character changed in the game? Physically, your character has changed. But as a character himself or herself, your character has just developed more. That's all it is. Now, of course, we're talking about video game world, but the same thing can be applied to real life. You discover more about yourself. And time feels so surreal. Time feels tremendously surreal. 9/11 feels like it happened ages ago. 9/11 happened in 2001, and it feels like it happened in the 1980s. When I look at footage from 2001, it looks like something out of the 80s, but it's not, right? It's not the 80s. It's a lot more recent than the 1980s. It's 2001, but it feels old. But yet we talk about, every single year, we talk about Bible stories. We talk about Moses and the Exodus. We talk about the crucifixion. We talk about the trial of Christ. We talk about Cain and Abel. We talk about Noah's flood. We talk about Adam and Eve. And these events happened thousands upon thousands of years ago, but yet we talk about them as if they happened hundreds of years ago, centuries ago. And the life of Christ is the most studied life than any other life that has ever existed in the history of Earth, okay, in the history of the universe. The life of Christ is the most studied biography. And it's so surreal that one event can have such an impact to the point where we're still talking about it thousands of years later. It's so fascinating to me. Something that happened in 2009 feels like it happened ages ago, but something that happened over 2,000 years ago, it's like it's still fresh in the collective consciousness of humanity. I'm rambling right now. This is one of those constant flows of consciousness type videos, but this is something that's been on my mind for a while. It's very interesting. Noah happened so long ago. The life of Noah. He lived before the flood. He lived after the flood. And there was a prophet that lived before the flood. He was one of the relatives of Noah. His name was Enoch. And in the Epistle of Jude, it talks about how Enoch warned the people before the flood that judgment was coming. And he wasn't even talking about the flood. He wasn't even talking about the first coming of Christ. He was talking about the second coming of Christ. And he said, "Behold, the Lord will come with 10,000s of his saints." He was already warning people about the second coming of Christ, and this was before the great deluge. This was before the flood even happened, which means that people knew that there was going to be a Messiah. It's not like that knowledge was only given to the Hebrews. It was given to all the sons of Noah. And it wasn't just something that was given to Shem, because the Hebrew line, the line of Israel, comes ultimately from Shem. It was given to all three sons of Noah. It had to have been. Noah was a priest. He was a preacher of God. He had to have given that knowledge over to his sons, which meant that people knew that there was going to be a Messiah. Even before Moses existed, even before the Hebrews were slaves in Egypt, before the Exodus, people knew, they were told through Noah that there was going to be a Messiah. There's a line from Plato, and this is something that I remember reading years ago. I believe it was written about, I think I remember reading it in a book called The Genius of Christianity by René de Chateaubriand, who was, if you have not read The Genius of Christianity, the title is rendered in two different ways. It's either The Genius of Christianity or it's The Beauty of Christianity. It was written by a French writer named René de Chateaubriand. And people have heard of a Chateaubriand steak. the name of that steak is named after him, because he would go to this restaurant every night and he would order a steak a certain way, and so it became the Chateaubriand steak. But he wrote a book called The Genius of Christianity. It's one of the best books I've ever read. If there was one book that I would recommend people to read, man, I'm kind of conflicted on this, because I would tell people to go read Josephus's history on the war between Rome and Jerusalem. But if you want to read a book that's really sublime, I would definitely recommend reading The Beauty of Christianity, or The Genius of Christianity, depending on the translation, by René de Chateaubriand. So I did a little quick Google search here, and I actually found the line from Chateaubriand's book, and he actually quotes a translator for Plato's works. And it says here, "Finally, Plato had so grand and so true a conception of supreme justice, and was so thoroughly acquainted with the depravity of men, that according to him, if a man supremely just were to appear upon earth, he would be imprisoned, calumniated, scourged, and at length crucified by those who, though fraught with injustice, would nevertheless pass for righteous." This is really fascinating. So Plato predicted that if a man ever came on earth, if a man who was so righteous ever appeared in the world, that he would be murdered by people who would be considered righteous. And that's exactly what happened during the crucifixion. The people who were passed as righteous murdered the one who was the most righteous in the world, the one who was the most pure, the one who really the only one who was actually pure, was murdered by the ones who were held, who were esteemed as being the righteous doctors of theology at that time. And it really goes to show that they did have some knowledge of a coming saint who would be a martyr, who would be murdered by society, because society would be so evil and would be so spiteful against somebody so righteous and pure. And it reminds me of that story in the book of Acts in which St. Paul goes to the Athenians and he says, "You have here an altar to the unknown God." Well, I am here to tell you who this unknown God is. It is Jesus Christ. So the ancients, they were told about this coming Messiah, but they had forgotten about him, to the point where the Athenians had an altar to this coming Messiah, but they called this coming Messiah the unknown God. He's forgotten about. We kind of remember him in some way, but we remember him, but we forgot his name. We don't know what his name is, right? They didn't know what his name was going to be, so they said, "Oh, the unknown God, the coming Messiah. He's going to be he's not. No, we don't know his name," and they didn't know his name, right? I mean, if you look at the prophecies of the Messiah in the Old Testament, it doesn't say his name's going to be Christ. That wasn't known until the announcement of his birth to Mary. But before that, nobody knew what the name of the Messiah was going to be. So the Greeks had this altar to the unknown God, and Paul says, this unknown God that you have, this unknown God, this God whose name you do not know, is Jesus Christ. And I believe that the origin of human sacrifice entailed people in far, far antiquity saying, our ancestors talked about this coming Messiah. This ancestor, amongst these ancestors, was Noah. And they said, well, our ancestors talked about this coming Messiah. Perhaps there is going to be no Messiah. Perhaps we are our own messiahs. We have this capacity to reach godhood. We have this capacity to die for our own sins. And so they begin to kill humans as sacrifices. And I think that I hypothesize, okay, that this was the origin of human sacrifice. But it's just so fascinating to me how surreal time feels, but at the same time, like looking at ancient history, how how we are actually closer than we actually think. Because we see, oh, there was Christianity, and that was a long time ago. Jesus Christ, that was a long time ago, and then there were these other religions. But really, these other religions, these pagan religions, are all corruptions of the original religion, which was taught by Noah. And that really goes to show that we're actually a lot closer than we actually think, right? We're actually a lot closer than we think. And our ancient ancestors were a lot closer than we actually think. I mean, the fact that the ark crashed, there were the three sons of Noah, and they all just crashed in Anatolia. They crashed on Mount Ararat, which lies right in between Armenia and Anatolia. And I think the oldest archaeological find ever was in Anatolia, was in modern day Turkey. I'm pretty certain of this. There's something to be said about that. I mean, where did humanity land after the flood waters finally subsided? It's right there in Anatolia. And if you look at where historians pinpoint the change of the Indo-European language, because all European languages, with the exception, I think, of Finnish, springs from one language, which was the Proto-Indo-European language. And it has been concluded that the beginning stages of the evolution of this language into the other European languages began in where? Anatolia. And I think the oldest was Phrygian, if I'm not mistaken, Hittite, Phrygian. If you look at Hittite, Phrygian, Lydian, all these ancient Anatolian languages, they all sprung from Indo-European. But the change in the Indo-European language, the change in the original European language, it began in Anatolia, the very spot where Noah's Ark landed. There's something to be said about this, because that's where people landed. That's where the last humans on Earth, that's where they ended up. We're a lot closer than we think. We're not that far away from that time period. Yes, I know it was thousands of years ago. But nonetheless, people talk about how, oh yeah, humans have been here for hundreds of thousands of years and all these things. But if you look at the oldest artifacts that we have, if you look at the oldest writings that we have, it goes back thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands of years, thousands of years. The ancient archaeological discoveries, the relics, the ruins, all these things, the artifacts, it all goes back as old as thousands of years ago. It's not hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's not a million years ago. It's only thousands of years ago. And we're still talking about Jesus Christ. We're still talking about Cain and Abel. We're still talking about the pharaohs of Egypt. We're still talking about ancient Babylon. We're still talking about the Crusades. And people will still argue about the Crusades. We're still talking about the Albigensian Crusade. We're still talking about the Inquisition, as if these were events that were recent, but yet something that happened in 2009, something that happened in 2001, feels very ancient. That is the surreal nature of time. And, what's very interesting is we can feel a certain way in one moment. We can have these moments of inspiration. And then a few days later, we can feel very dry. All of these things, all of these changes, all of these different dimensions of who we are, it all just, it goes through all these vicissitudes. It's the different layers, the different dimensions of our being. It's super fascinating. And one thing I want to say, man, I was thinking about this today. Video game questions. People going online and asking questions about video games, or people going online and posting a video about a video game. But it's not just video games, right? It's anything. People posting a video of their chickens, or a video of their pet cats, or something like that. And we look at the video and go, oh, that's really cute. And here's the crazy thing about the internet today. And this goes back to what I'm saying about the surrealness of time. We can find stuff. Okay. If I found a video from 1990 something, it's not originally going to be on YouTube, right? I'm going to have to go find the tape. I'm going to have to find the video cassette that it was recorded on, and then I could put it online. And that goes for anything before the era of YouTube, or the era of people uploading videos online. If I want to find something from the 1970s, 80s, before, right? Before that, basically in the time when people were filming things but they couldn't put it online, I would have to originally find it on a video cassette. But that's not the world we live in anymore. That's not the world that we live in anymore. Nowadays, we can find a YouTube channel ran by some guy who we never met, who's not famous or anything like that. That person dies, and his channel is still there, and his videos are still there. There's something crazy about that. And once in a while, my morbid self will pop up, and I'll find YouTube channels that were ran by people who are now dead. There's something so crazy about that. It's like, man, this guy he's dead. You'll find his videos, he's talking about whatever, he's talking about music, whatever it is. And he's no longer here. It's like you can go online. Back in the day, back in the day, there was a monopoly on who was filming what, right? And there was a monopoly on airing videos. It was all controlled by big TV stations. You wanted something on television, you needed the connections for it, right? Or you had to be famous, or you got one of your home videos on America's Most Funny Videos or something like that, right? That's how you got your stuff out there. Nowadays, everybody can post America's funniest home videos. Anybody, you film something on your iPhone, and your iPhone over here, you just right there on YouTube. It's right there on YouTube. There's no need for these shows anymore. They don't exist anymore because everybody's got a camera. Everybody can put something online and it can go viral. It can get millions of views. I can post something. I can post a cat licking himself and post it online, and boom, we can get 1 million views, 100,000 views, something. Anybody can be a journalist. Anybody can do all these things because of YouTube, because of social media. Back in the day, it was you had to be a part of some mainstream newspaper, New York Times, whatever. And it was a big deal being a journalist back in the day. Back in the 70s, to be a journalist was a big deal. You were going to war zones, and you worked for the New York Times. You worked for NBC, ABC, whatever. 60 Minutes, you did a special. You interviewed some dictator, right? There was like all these crazy things that you were doing. Nowadays, literally anybody can just go get a camera, go fly to Ukraine, go film himself talking in some war zone, go to Mariupol, go to Bakhmut or wherever, have a helmet on your head, and your friend or whoever, you can just film yourself talking, put it up on YouTube, and you can just do videos like that. You're a journalist. You didn't have to go to school. All you needed was some money, so you can pay for your plane ticket and pay for your hotel or wherever you're staying. Anybody can do it. But back in the day, if some famous person died, you went on. Where did you go? You went on television. You had his movies. Or let's say some famous journalist died. The news station that he worked for would do some memorial episode where they would talk about this person and how he was such a great journalist, and they would speak of him in loving memory. And then that was it. He was forgotten about. Nowadays, I can just go onto YouTube and I can find the channel of somebody who's now passed away. And there are his videos. I can find videos on YouTube uploaded when YouTube first popped up. I can find something from 15 years ago. And you know it's from 15 years ago because the damn video is so grainy. And it's like, wow, this is like old footage. And if YouTube lasts in the future decades of our existence, and we're all still alive, we can go on YouTube and we can find in 2050, we can go on YouTube and find something from the year 2009. It's like, oh wow, this is from 2009, and it's all on YouTube. It's all there. It's like YouTube is not just a social media platform where you can post videos of your cats or videos of yourself cooking. YouTube is literally an historical archive. That's what it is. It's a giant virtual library. It's insane, guys. I've been thinking about this for weeks now. Maybe even months now that I think of it. It's a virtual archive. You can go on YouTube and be like, when YouTube first came out, right, everything was new because it just came out. There was no videos from 15 years prior to that. It was all new. So everything just feels new. But try going on YouTube and finding videos from 2009. Try to find videos from 2010. Look at the video footage. Look at the quality of the video. Guys, it looks so flippin' old. This looks so grainy. You'll find some video that some guy uploaded when he was in high school. And now he's in his 30s. You're like, wow, that's a really old video. Because it is. But because YouTube still feels new, right? It still feels like it's recent. And in a way, it is recent. I mean, it's only like 15 years old. It's still, the oldest videos on YouTube still feel really, really old. They feel surreally old in a very surreal sense. It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. And I'll find, once in a while, I'll go back and I'll find like old songs that I used to listen to in high school, and I'll be like, when was this video uploaded? Oh, it was uploaded 11 years ago, 2010, 2011, or something like that. It's like, wow, I remember listening to this song back in 2008. And there it is. You can find videos uploaded when I was a senior in high school. And I really wish, man, I remember when I first started YouTubing, I started filming myself on a Toshiba computer. It was a used Toshiba laptop that I bought from eBay. That was the first laptop that I owned. Broke down after, I don't know, in a matter of months, the damn thing broke down. But I remember doing my earliest YouTube videos on this thing, and it was crazy. It was crazy. At that time, it felt so new. But man, if I could find my first videos, I would upload them on here. It's insane. It's so insane, guys. It's amazing. It really is. This mic is from 2009. Believe it or not, this mic, it still works very well. But yeah, that's the surreal feeling of time. This feeling that something that happened 15 years ago feels like it happened ages ago, but we can talk about things that happened thousands of years ago and still argue about them as if they happened last year. We have forgotten about 9/11, even though when 9/11 happened, it was the biggest news ever. I mean, of course, right? Thousands of Americans slaughtered in New York City by terrorists. This was the biggest story ever. Nowadays, oh my gosh. When 9/11 was still very fresh in our minds, the truthers popped up, and they were saying that 9/11 was an inside job. And they were considered fringe. They were considered to be a crazy, small group of lunatics. Nowadays, it's very common to find people who believe that 9/11 was an inside job. When it was fresh in our minds, we all thought they were crazy. Everybody thought they were nuts. And nowadays, 9/11, it's an old story. And you can talk about it in the most critical way as freely as you want to because it feels so old. And the sensitivity for 9/11 is dead. It's like Pearl Harbor. And now people can say things like, I remember when I was in high school, there was a substitute teacher that we had who was a crazy far left nut. This was in Northern California. so bear with me here. This is how crazy this woman was. She would walk around with these T-shirts on that would expose her shoulders and her armpits, those type of shirts, and her armpits were as hairy as a cat. Okay, I mean it was horrendous. That's how crazy this woman was. But she would literally teach us that the reason why the terrorists hit those buildings was because America was hiding missiles underneath the building, and the terrorists knew that they were going to use the missiles to hit the Middle East. So it was a preemptive strike. She literally taught us this, and she was 100% convinced of it. But we all, I mean, I remember people hearing this and thinking that she was nuts, and she was nuts. But nowadays, you could probably say that and enough, and you can get a ton of people because it's the internet and because anybody can be a journalist and anybody can film anything they want. Nowadays, you could say that online, and you'd probably have a ton of people who would believe you. It's the surrealness of time, and it's within the framework of time that we see shock, that we see eventually callousness to whatever shocked us. And it's also within the framework of time, it's within the paradigm of time that we see self-discovery. And you know what's also crazy about this all? I remember growing up and hearing about the Holocaust every single day because we all watched History Channel. And in those days, History Channel was all about one thing, and that was World War II. They didn't even talk about World War I. It was all World War II stuff, right? Once in a while, you heard about Napoleon. Once in a while, they did something about, who killed this pharaoh, or who killed King Hotep or whatever. I don't know. Cleopatra, banging two guys. But it was all about World War II. At the end of the day, World War II was king. Because this was in the 1990s. World War II was still, obviously this was a huge conflict. It was a global conflict. There were a lot more veterans, World War II veterans, alive then than now, and so it was still fresh in the minds of Americans and Europeans and people who went through it. And nowadays they don't even talk about World War II. They rarely ever talk about it. Goodness, I remember hearing about Holocaust denial when I was in high school, and I thought that was the craziest thing ever. And today I'm telling you, if you do a video about the Holocaust, your comment section will be flooded by Holocaust deniers. I'm not joking. It's ridiculous. It's insane. But Holocaust denial has now become mainstream. It's surreal, I know, but this is the world we live in. And I remember back in 2006, hearing about the Holocaust and hearing about Israel and why we have to support Israel and why Iran is evil. And nowadays, it's very common. It's actually more common to hear criticism of Israel. It's more common to hear people who deny the Holocaust. And I remember last year, people were literally dropping pamphlets in our neighborhood about how the Jews are Satan worshipers and how they run the world. I mean, this would have been unheard of in 2006, but it happens. Now it happens. And the Holocaust has become so received with the indifference of our minds in the vicissitudes of time that the sensitivity for the Holocaust has been greatly diminished, and you can talk about it in the most insensitive ways you want, and you'll have a huge following, and people will follow you, and people will believe you. So not only is there, in the paradigm of time, in the process of time, in the movement of time, however you want to describe it, there is not only self-discovery within people, but there is a collective change. And change is actually the wrong word. It's more of, there are these moments of great self-discovery or great discovery about why we must go against certain evils. Like, for example, America used to be openly eugenist. We had eugenics everywhere. Eugenics was a part of policy in American society. Then we went through World War II, and people came back and said, to hell with all this stuff. We're done with it. And they removed it from all the textbooks. Now it's very common to find people who will openly preach eugenics, online especially. And the idea, another thing also, World War II, after World War II, it was like, okay, Germany, you have to be an agricultural society. That was the initial policy regarding Germany, that it was gonna have to be a farming country. It was gonna produce the cabbage and the potatoes for the world. Well, that policy was thrown out of the trash fairly quickly because people wanted to make money out of German industry. And so Washington said, okay, you guys can go back to being industrious again and go back to being a huge economy. And we wanted that because we wanted to use the German economy to help the dollar in Europe. And now we're talking about Germany remilitarizing itself. We're talking about Japan becoming the third largest defense spender in the world. At one point, America dropped a nuke on Japan, two nukes on Japan. And we said Japan can never, ever be involved in militarism. And now we're saying, now we're cheering on Japanese militarism, and now we're cheering on German militarism. It's the surrealness of time. At one point, America is dropping nukes on Japan. At one point, America is remembering World War II and the valor of American soldiers who stormed the beaches of Normandy and who fought against the Germans in Operation Market Garden and all these other battles. And now we're saying Germany needs to remilitarize itself. It's so surreal, the world that we're living in. I had to do this video. I had to get this off of my mind. It's so surreal. Life is so surreal. And it can happen within a generation. It can happen just after one generation, two generations. At one moment, we're talking about how bad Nazism is and eugenics is evil and German militarism was so bad. And now we're saying, oh no, it's no big deal. That's fine. That's fine. I can guarantee you, mark my words, in the near future, they're going to be saying Germany needs to have nuclear weapons and Japan should have nuclear weapons. You'll see it. Germany and Japan are going to start talking about getting nuclear weapons. You'll see it. And they're going to be they're going to be armed with nuclear weapons. You'll see it. It's the surrealness of time, everybody. At one point, everybody's shocked by something, and in another point, everybody's accepting that which shocked them. Because as time goes on, we become callous to certain things that once shocked us, and then we accept them. And we accept evil. And then we become shocked by the evil. It bites us in the ass. And then as time goes on, we return to that evil. Human beings don't change. Human beings only discover who they truly are as time goes on. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.